Hi, my name is Tammy. I'm a human being. I was experimenting and I did something. Let me show you what I came up with. This quilt block is something that I was just playing around with, and I was like, I like these colors. I think I like these colors. And I decided to create this block. And then once I created it, I thought it needs some zhuzhing. So I added the embroidery letters, the N, E, S, and W, north, south, east, and west. And here it is. So in today's tutorial, I am going to show you how I constructed this quilt block. Stay tuned. The supplies I'll be using to complete today's quilt block are my AccuQuilt Go Me. I'll be using my 9-inch Go Cube Mix and Match set. And in addition to the base set, which is here, I'll be using the companion set, the Angles. I have selected 5 colors from my stash of my favorite fabric line, Moda Grunge, and the 5 colors are here. Stay tuned and I'll show you how I use this Go Me to cut out all the pieces for the quilt block. I will be using 4 dies to make this quilt block. The first 2 dies are from the Mix and Match basic set, and the other 2 dies are from the companion set called the Angles. Let me show you a close-up of all the dies. The first 2 dies I'll be using are from the base Mix and Match 9-inch set. I'll be using shape number 2, which is a smaller square compared to shape number 1, which is the larger square. I'll be using shape number 5 or die number 5, which are half square triangles. And again, these are the smaller half square triangles because shape number 3 are the larger half square triangles. From the companion set, the Angles, I'll be using shape number 13, which is the triangles in the square die. Also from the companion set, the Angles, I'll be using shape number 14, which are the sides to the triangles in the square. Next, I'll show you what all the pieces of this quilt block looks like cut out. Stay tuned. Let me show you how I cut die number 13, which is the triangles in the square die. The first thing I'll do is fan fold my fabric and place it on the die and cover it with the cutting mat. Let me do that and then I'll show you what that sandwich looks like. Stay tuned. I've fan folded the fabric into 4 different layers because I need 4 of these shapes to complete the quilt block. Fan folding is a process or a procedure where you take your fabric, you place it, the first layer flat on your die, and then you flip the fabric over and flip it over again as such. With the AccuQuilt Go Me, you can cut up to 6 layers in one pass. Let me fill you in on a huge tip using this Go Me. So when I first purchased this machine, I became very frustrated because everything was new. The machine was new, the dies were new, and the cutting mat was new. So when I would make a cut, I noticed that I could just get easily pass it through one time and then I was becoming frustrated. What I've learned over time with use of this Go Me is that the more you use your die, the easier it is to roll through this Go Me. And that is because the dies have a foam right here, which is like a cushion. So the more times that this foam gets compressed while it's going through the cutter, it gets a little flat. And when it becomes a little flatter, it's easier to go through the Go Me. I didn't have this challenge with the Go Big Electric because the Go Big Electric, of course, is powerful. So what I noticed over time was hey, I started using my dies more and they became easier to go through the Go Me. So if you have a Go Me and you're struggling because you're finding that it's not going through, just keep running it through and keep running it through, and then the foam will flatten a little bit and it'll work much easier. So for demonstration purposes, I've already started this process. The 9-inch mix and match dies, I don't use them as much as my 6-inch die. So I'm encountering that same issue. This is a relatively new die and it's hard to go through because the foam isn't flattened yet. So I've kind of cheated a little and I've started it because I don't want to shake everything, this table and the camera as I'm cutting. But this is the process. So once you get it in, you turn this crank and you crank it through. And I'm just holding, you could either hold here or hold the base to steady the machine. And you roll it through and it comes out on the other side. So then you sort of give it a little rub so that you remove the static. And then this is what everything looks like. You have perfectly cut squares in a triangle. One major tip that I have when you are using brand new dies in your AccuQuilt GoMe cutter. The website or AccuQuilt says that you can cut up to 6 layers of quilting cotton with the GoMe. But in my experience, when these dies are brand new, the foam is at its highest height. And so I recommend cutting 1 to 2 layers of fabric at a time through the cutter so that you break in this foam. And then once it sort of smushes a little bit, then you can cut up to 6 layers. I know that's not the whole point. The point is to save time and cut 6 layers at a time. But if you do that, you will become frustrated very quickly like I did. And I want to save you time and frustration with figuring out what's wrong with your machine and why it's not cutting. And again, the reason why it's doing that is because the foam is brand new and you need to break it in. And once it's broken in, you'll have no trouble cutting up to 6 layers. And you can use a well-used mat like this with your GoMe. So now let me show you how I cut out the sides to these square and triangles. I have a old school Polaroid camera. It's a modern Polaroid, but it's still a Polaroid camera. And the reason why I have it is for situations like this. So this shape is easy to cut, but it's difficult to sew unless you figure out where to place or cut your fabric. So I will save you the stress and drama and fill you in on how to do it. When you're cutting either the square and the triangle or this kite shape, you need to make sure that you have some of your fabric facing up and some of your fabric facing down. So what I've done is I've taken this picture to remind me that for each shape, I need one pointing up and one pointing down. So I did not want to run the risk of cutting this incorrectly with fan folding because I get all twisted up and down and up and down. So I just pre-cut my fabric. And so I have 2 of them or 4 of them with the print side facing up. And then I have 2 more with the print side facing down. So once I cut these shapes, you'll have something that looks like this. Ta-da! So essentially, this was one of the shapes that was cut up and this one was cut down. So what I'll do now is piece this side here, right? Put a 1/4 inch seam here and then press it and this will open up, and then turn this one this way and do that same 1/4 inch seam here, and then it will open up to create this quilt unit. Here are all the shapes cut out. What I've done is I've organized them into sections in which I will piece them together. And then as you can see here, I cut out that shape that are the sides for the triangle and the square. I cut them out and I labeled all of these up and I've labeled all of these down so that when I go to piece either side to this triangle and a square, I will have everything organized so that I minimize the amount of unstitching or mistakes that I'll make. So stay tuned and I'll show you what all of these units look like once they're pieced together. I've pieced together all of the elements to make 9 different units for this quilt block. So my next step in the construction of this block is I'm going to piece or sew together all of these units to complete the block. Then after that, I am going to show you how I use my Brother Stellaire embroidery machine to embroider some designs on this block. Stay tuned so that you can see what that process looks like. Ta-da! The block is completed. It ends up being 13 inches horizontally by 13 inches vertically. My next step in creating this block is I am going to use my Brother Stellaire embroidery machine to embroider letters on each one of these orange triangles. Stay tuned so you can see how that all turns out. We are at Darrow, and Darrow is my Brother Stellaire XE1 embroidery machine. I've selected the font that I'll be using for the lettering that will go on this quilt block. And this letter S will embroider out to be 1.7 inches by 1.6 inches. I really love this Brother Stellaire XE1 because it allows me to hoop my project and take a picture of it on my iPhone, send that picture from my iPhone to the machine here so that I can position this letter to get the stitches exactly where I want them to go on this quilt block. Let me show you what the hooped project looks like. So what I just showed you on the screen was the scanned image of the block with the letters superimposed onto the image. So what I'm going to do now is actually move the hoop around so that the stitching begins directly in the center of this target square so that my letter S is centered exactly where I want it to be on the block. It's a little hard to see, but the needle is smack dab in the middle of the crosshairs of this target sticker. So what I'll do now is lift up the foot and remove the target sticker because I don't want that embroidered onto my project. I'll put the foot back down and I will press this green button and it will start stitching. Darrow has finished embroidering the letter S. I am going to embroider the rest of the letters on this quilt block and then I'll show you what the finished project looks like. Stay tuned. Ta-da! My little experiment is completed. The block finishes at 13.5 inches horizontally by 13.5 inches vertically. I added some embroidery here to make the block have a little more interest. Let me show you what the back of this block looks like. So here's the back. Until I decide what project I am going to make with this block, I'm just going to leave the extra stabilizer in there so that the stitches remain in place over time because who knows when I'll finish up this block. A couple of lessons I learned while finishing up this project, and the main one is to always pre-stitch your letters first before you place them on your finished block. What happened with the W here is I was shrinking the size down, and because I didn't test the way it would stitch out, the embroidery here is a little puckered, but the N came out beautiful and the E and the S. So what do you think, my quilting buddy? I have no idea what to name this block. So if you have any suggestions, leave them down in the comments and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, cheers.